Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of our weekly Rashi study class with Rabbi Rebecca Schatz.
We are going to potentially finish the first chapter of Megillat Esther. Never did I think I would see the day, just in time for Purim 2027. Okay, so what I was working on just a second ago was was chapter 2, because we potentially would get there today. I don't know, but we will definitely try to finish chapter 1, and then next time get to chapter 2. I just realized my blur is on. I will turn that off. So there we go. Okay. All right. So let's. I will share my screen for those of you who are not in the room. But let's, can someone just recap for us where we left off? Don't tell us where we're going, but where did we leave off? We left off with verse 19, but where are we in our story? Anybody want to share? Okay, not according to the Megillah. According to the Megillah, what has happened? That's according to commentaries. Okay, so okay, great. So, hello everyone. So this never happens. There are more people on Zoom than there are in the room. The king has been given advice to make sure that Vashti is never again in his presence. What Barry said, and I said to him that was not in the Megillah, is that commentators believe that what that means is that she's been asked to be executed. That's not in our Megillah, that's in the commentaries. So it is possible that is what happened, but that is just story. That is not according to our text. So that's where we're at. We're going to now go to verse 20. Again, we are going to try to finish chapter 1 today, if we possibly can. So Elon's very excited about that, all the way from the East Coast. Okay. So does someone want to read verse 20 for us? Marshall. Stevie, can you hand him the mic? Thanks.
Okay. V'nishma pitgam hamelech asher yaseh b'chol malchuto ki rabahi. V'chol hanashim yitenu yikar levalehen lemigadol v'yad katon.
Great.
Katan, right? Not katon. Katan. I'm just going to read the altered translation.
Oh, okay, great.
And let the king's edict that he will issue be heard throughout his kingdom, large though it is. And let all wives accord worth to their husbands, from the greatest to the least.
Okay. Questions, thoughts, comments on this verse thus far?
Who's talking? This is
okay. So Joel just asked, "Who's talking?" Right, which is an interesting question. Right, if we go to the verse before, well, actually, 2 verses before. No, 1 verse before. No, I think it's just 1 verse before. Right. So it's Memuchan is speaking, right? We have in verse 18 and maybe even 17, we kind of have a break in between, but he is then again speaking in verse 19. And now he's continuing his response in verse 20. Other questions or thoughts on this?
Whoever the speaker was really worried about his own life talking back to him.
Okay, so Rachel thinks that it's possible that he, whoever the speaker, was very nervous about his own wife talking back to him. Okay, Elon?
Yeah, it seems to me that the whole speaker, even though the whole first chapter is unbelievably misogynistic. And on top of that, I would suggest that the fact that whoever wrote this and then the subsequent rabbis needed this shows that they had very low self-esteem, right? I mean, it's like Why do you need everyone to kiss your ass? It's not like, it seems odd, but
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about their own self-esteem, but that's a very, very interesting point. Um, oh, sorry, Paul, go ahead.
One question I would ask is, it's being presented as, well, the idea is being presented as important to keep the respective wives for their husbands, but to what degree is that actually the motivation versus the necessity of Vashti taking part in the ceremony because of the importance of the ceremony? I'm throwing that out as a question for someone who has a better feel for this than I do.
Meaning,
what she did debate him about.
okay. Yeah, that's a very good question. Like, is this judgment going to her because of what we talked about last week, which is it could influence other women to do the same thing? Or was it specifically because she did it, right? And it was her action, and so she now needs the punishment? It's a good question. I mean, it seems from the last verse and from this one that we're more concerned about the far-reaching kind of ripple effect here of her actions rather than just hers. But we start off this whole saga, of which we've been in for a few weeks now, with us speaking specifically to the fact that Vashti is who Vashti is, and therefore we should be concerned about this behavior. Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is some of the earlier verses have inferred that this is actually a very important political gathering,
right?
In addition to being a big party. So right. That's why I'm raising the question.
Yeah, it's a very good question, Rick.
Hi, so fast.
Hi.
So all right. Well, I noticed the trope. Of course, I'm obsessed. That's just the way it is. So Venishma has a Tilisha Ketana on top of it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The word Venishma, I learned from Rabbi Klickfeld to look at the tenses of things, and it's passive, right? It's nifal, I believe. Mm-hmm. It will be heard, right? So that's there. And then the end of the sentence, Lemi gadol ve'ad katan. It's kind of a phrase from the biggest to the least. Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to point out in same chapter earlier, okay, in verse 5, the people that are just found, lechol ha'am hanim tseim. It's got the same Tilisha Ketana on it. And it's just the people that were found, where's the translation? All the people who lived in the fortress, but I think nim tseim, I think it's the people that are just found there, the people that are just milling around. And then the end of that sentence, wait, it's not in the end, it's in the middle. The same Lemi gadol ve'ad katan. So I just thought that the parallel, there's a theme there. And I'd like to bring up again, I did this a month ago, that when we were going through the time of the history when this was written, 300, 400, that there's this Greek play, Lysistrata, where the women all get together and they conspire to stop the war that the Greeks are having by withholding sex from their husbands. And it's a satire on how the world works, that women could actually stop a war by not having relations with their husbands or boyfriends. So I think, it sounds misogynistic and all that, but I think the whole story is just a satire. No, women wouldn't just disobey their husbands just because of this one thing. It's just playing with the male-female relationship, I think. But anyway, I'll stop.
No. Everything that you said is very interesting. I think there's lots of relevance, especially in the last piece of your comment, and especially when we think about that this is a story that really centers around women and their relationships, not romantic relationships, but their relationships around men in leadership roles, right? And so what effect, what power, what agency do these women have, both in accordance to their relationships to these men, but also over kingdoms, for whom, when we think about who those kingdoms are made up of, it's primarily, in terms of those with power, men, right? And so it's a really, really good point. And we see this also in our Torah. Can anybody think of where we see this in the Torah? We see this similar to what Rick was bringing up in terms of like the women having agency from taking something away from their husbands to keep them. Can anybody think of it? Oh yeah, Stevie.
Yeah, woman, wherever it is, if a woman tries to stop her husband from getting into a fight by grabbing onto his genitalia, the hand gets cut off, and it's a whole thing.
Great. That's not even the example I was thinking of, but but that is another example. There's a midrash that talks about the right after it in the realm of the golden calf, but right after the people have left Egypt, this idea that the women really had agency over whether or not their husbands were going to fight or be part of the building of the golden calf. It's a midrash that kind of encompasses lots of different elements of the general story that we're in. Yeah, Stevie?
And for going with midrash, there's also Owen ben Felet. This is a good example of, like, because he's mentioned in the verse of Korach's rebellion and then not mentioned again, and the midrash is like, oh, well, his wife talked him out of it.
Right.
Yeah, there's a.
So to Rick's point, I think there are lots of different areas, and Rick, you keep bringing up Potiphar's wife, right? In that case, she's not necessarily the good guy, but the idea here that women can have not only power but ways of enticing anyone, though in the case of our Torah and Megillat, it seems to be a male counterpart, to be able to also do things just like our male leaders can do. Okay, Barry, and then Stevie.
In a positive sense, in Egypt, the women would meet the men at the end of the day and appropriate. So as tired as they were, they would entice their men.
Yeah, according to the midrash, right? Stevie.
So two things. One is, I mentioned at the beginning of Khan's speech how this whole thing feels like certain politicians today that are just agitating.
Right.
And here, I feel like we see from the same politicians the like wink towards populism that's, as part of their toolkit. Mm-hmm. And here we see that he's saying like, oh yeah, even the small folk will have this kind of respect. So that feels resonant. And the other thing is the word yakar.
Yeah, good. I was about to ask. Good.
I don't have any idea for it, but it, as opposed to kavod or some more familiar word,
right.
It seems like there's got to be some connection to something.
Yeah, Marshall, you going to talk about yakar? Okay, great.
Walter has a comment on it. He says it's not Hebrew; it's an Aramaic word.
Oh, fascinating. Okay.
The Hebrew yakar, one of numerous Aramaic usages in the story, means worth, honor, or respect.
Right. Yes, great. Okay, so the reason I've had my phone here for a second, those of you on Zoom can't see that, but I have Safari up because you can click on specific words and see what their different translations are. So yakar to me, and I'm so glad Stevie brought this up, yakar to me was also the word in this sentence, and I was like, what is this possibly doing here? Right? The other words make a lot of sense, even if we don't know them. The other words make a lot of sense in terms of the story that we've been told. Yakar really doesn't. Marshall's explanation is the same one that Safaria gives. It actually doesn't mention that it's Aramaic, but it's very possible that's where it comes from. But it does say that it's honor or esteem or value. The way that we think of yakar in modern day Hebrew is what? What does yakar mean? Sorry?
Expensive.
Dear or?
Expensive.
Expensive, exactly. Right. Something that like is very precious or expensive. If you go to the shuk, right, and something is much more expensive at one stand than the other, you might use this word by way of bargaining something down, right? So the fact that this word is used here seems out of place until we recognize this, and Stevie mentioned this as well, this idea of lemigadol ve'ad katan, that this should really matter to anyone, whether you are high up in authority or very low, whether you are rich or you are poor, whether you, I think it's also referring to whether you are old or you are young, right? This is something that now is for everybody. It is not just for the people in the kingdom or the people who would be of the same status as the king. Yeah, do you want to say something, Marshall?
The altar.
Is the microphone on?
No.
Oh, it is? Okay,
It's
just
not-
hold it closer, man.
Yeah, he says the Hebrew yakar, and then he says one of numerous Aramaic usages
Oh,
in
okay.
this story. So it's
Got it.
Aramaic.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, Barry?
Reference in the Torah to high to the lowest is also in the Exodus story, that the last plague, it's going to hit everybody, even to the woman in the millstone, the slave with the millstone. So everyone, all the way down.
Yeah. Yeah, Stevie.
Search and
For what?
for the word yakar.
Oh, okay.
And it appears 8 times in Megillat Esther, but the most sort of prominent, I guess, are right at the beginning in chapter 1, verse 4, when it's right? So like the whole pomp and circumstance of Ahasuerus's, and then at the very end, like Hudimai Torah, obviously
Yes,
right?
yeah, right.
We know that verse very well. So
Yeah.
Sort of at the beginning, it's something that seems exclusively royalty, and then it's presented tantalizingly towards the common folk, but it does wind up with the Jews.
Well, and it's interesting when we look at it here. If you look at the Hebrew very specifically, v'chol hanashim yichnu yakar, they will give preciousness, which I know is not English, but if we think about it as giving someone that which is precious to their husbands, lamigadol ve'ad katan, right? That it's yes, it's honor, but it's also a sense of like putting on a pedestal, right? And so back to Elon's point, we're still in this realm of the men should have authority, the women are still subservient, right? Which isn't surprising coming from the king and this edict, but excuse me. But the fact that part of this edict is to not just know that they are in charge, but also to hold them as precious, which if I were to say that in a sentence, I don't think that people would think that that was a bad thing. But when you hear it in a sense of thinking of your masters, really, ba'alehen is their masters, not even their husbands, just if we're going to be very technical here, showing them that which is precious to you by treating them a certain way. That's a very specific wording, right? Because I forget who said it. Maybe it was Joel. That you could have used the word kavod to mean honor. You didn't have to use the word yakar. So it's a very interesting way of using this particular term. And then to Stevie's point, the last, right, La Yehudim Haita Ora V'Simcha Sason Ve'Yikar, right? We are going to see that later on. And there it makes a lot of sense, maybe because it's being said in the positive and we know the sentence. But the fact that it is something that is precious to us makes more sense than putting someone out as precious to them for whatever reason, which is why I think the translation here is respect, and I don't remember the word that they used in the Alter translation. Okay, Marshall, can you read the Steinsaltz for us? So this is Steinsaltz's commentary. This is not from the Gemara, but I know that Adin Steinsaltz wrote a commentary on the Gemara, so everyone assumes that if he's writing it's Gemara. It's not. This is just his commentary on the Megillah.
Yeah. The king's edict that he will enact will be heard throughout his entire kingdom, although the kingdom is vast, and all the wives, following the dissemination of the royal precedent, will confer honor on their husbands and will not disobey their commands from great to small.
Okay, so what is Steinsaltz doing here? What is he adding?
At least in the English, the qualifier from great to small moves from describing the men to describing the commands.
Great. Yeah, Barry.
The question was asked earlier, who was giving this advice? And that was back in verse 16, is Memucan declared to the king. Queen Vashti has committed the offense, blah, 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 blah. And all the from then on, it's Memucan who's doing this. And of course, then we have the tradition that who was Memucan, that is Haman, and connects that. Another issue is this edict. We'll see later as we read further. It's so unnecessary. It's already known in the culture. The men rule the house. I mean that's the nature of the culture, and so this is sort of an unnecessary thing. And the king just appears foolish, and because of that. It sets it up for the story of Esther, is that when the Hamans proclaims that all the Jews are going to be killed, they don't take it necessarily seriously to act immediately.
So, right, as we mentioned earlier, this is Memucan speaking, and the rabbis come to believe, because of the rest of the Megillah, that Memucan could have been Haman. That is not what the Megillah says, but that is what our rabbis have commented, that it is possible that the characters were the same. Okay, Renee.
So I was struck that by Steinsaltz, even though in the previous paragraph, talking about respecting him and whatnot. But here he really gets into also not only respect, but just that they won't disobey him, the king. So it feels a lot harsher to me, the way Steinsaltz is.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
His read on it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the previous paragraph, it was from high to low, and here it's from great to small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
In the feeling of it.
He's interpreting different phrases, right? So if you look at it in the Hebrew, you can see that which is bolded is our verse, and then he's adding in words to extrapolate out meaning from the word. So he's actually midrashicizing, if that's a word, the verse within the text, right? So velo yamaru pihem lemigadol ve'ad katan is that they will not literally make their words bitter, but they will not disobey their commands from the big to the small. Okay, can we go? Oh yeah, Marshall.
The Sanchino translation from 1946 has a very interesting, to me, translation of the word "v'nishma."
Oh, okay, great.
Surely it means to be heard.
Yeah,
but it is translating it as "be published."
Oh, interesting.
Be published is that to make public.
Yeah.
To be private.
Oh, interesting. Right. So maybe
you're publishing an edict, therefore it has a sense of publishing an edict, therefore it has a sense of officialness.
Right. And by saying that something will be heard, that must mean that it was published out so that people could then hear it. That's a really interesting translation. Okay. Let's go to the next verse. Let's see if we can do it. Anybody want to read verse 21? Joel, yeah, go ahead.
ויטב הדבר בעיני המלך והשרים ויעש המלך כדבר הממוכן. So this thing appeared good in the eyes of the king, and on the ministers, and the king did as Memucan said.
Okay, so what do we gain from this verse here? It seems very straightforward, but what are we gaining from this? Who has the upper hand? Yeah, Norm.
We don't have a transcript of the proceedings. We have the summary presented in the Megillah. And so we don't know if there may have been some controversy about this among the cabinet, the ministers, the princes, whoever, whatever we want to call them.
Yeah.
And we also don't know, Menucham, especially if he is Haman, probably is known to be a pretty ruthless opponent.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a pretty powerful person. It seems like this is going to pass anyways. Somebody who might have raised an objection
Mm-hmm.
might feel that they're better off just staying silent, going along.
Mm-hmm.
And we certainly see that sort of thing happening in other places in the world since then and even until today. We also know that the king generally goes along, when he's hesitant, he asks for advice.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be why the ministers generally were consulted, or the princes or whoever they were.
Right.
So we have this situation where they're all going along with it, and he goes along with it because he just always, throughout the entire book, goes along with whoever the last person was who spoke to him. He's completely a ridiculous character. And when we reach Steinsaltz, I think we'll find that even Steinsaltz feels that.
Okay. So interesting.
Chapter 7,
Wait.
When Haman begs for, clemency or whatever, he says no.
So I think so it's interesting. It's interesting to think, you've brought this up before, and it's interesting to think about the fact that the king here was the one who suggested that there be something that happened to Vashti. Then there was this idea that there should be an edict. The edict was then drawn up, and the king said, "Okay, sure, yeah, that sounds fine." It's an interesting way of thinking of leadership, but it's how leadership works, right? If you think about how our government works, how governments all over the world that have someone who's at least somewhat listening to others works, right? They are not usually the ones drafting plans and ideas. They usually have people around them who are doing that, even if it comes from something that either happened to them or that they experience that they now need to have change. They very rarely, the person all the way at the tippy top, they are very, very rarely the person who is then saying, okay, let me draft up a thing and see if y'all like it. Usually there's a whole group of people who draft something and then show it to the person who's at the very, very top. So this is not abnormal, right? It is not abnormal. What I will say is that in many chapters, probably in like 6 months, we will look at the way that Esther and Mordecai interact. And to your point, Norm, one of the things that we will see is that very often Esther is the person who is in King Achashverosh's role, which is Mordecai is suggesting to Esther what to do. Esther does it. Esther says what Mordecai suggests that she do. And yet we see her as this heroic leader and this amazing person. So the reason I wanted to bring this up, this is not the point of the verse in the Megillah, obviously. This is the point of Rebecca Schatz bringing this piece here. But the idea that we play into our own narrative about who these characters are based on how we feel about them is very interesting, because Esther's going to do exactly the same thing when we meet her and when she's dealing with Mordecai. She does not speak for herself. She does not come up with ideas for herself. That doesn't make her a bad person. That just is the case. And yet we think of her as being this person who does all this on her own. The only person who does anything on her own is Vashti, right? And we vilify her in many, 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 many ways. So it's an interesting way of thinking about how we're using this verse to write our own narrative.
even with Vashti, we don't know if perhaps some of the women around her, the important
I'm just going
women there,
Megillah
may have
sense.
said to her, hey, he can't interrupt our event on the spur of the moment and ask you to appear naked in front of all of the leading men of the empire.
Right. We could spend days writing background to the Megillah. I'm just speaking about what's actually in the Megillah. So yes, we have no idea about any of the things that we're reading in terms of what happened before or after or behind the scenes. But in terms of the specific writing in the Megillah, that was the point that I was trying to make. So okay, let's read the Steinsaltz on verse 21.
The matter was pleasing in the eyes of the king and the princes. Memucan's appraisal of the fundamental problem, with its potentially serious consequences, was greeted with approval. In his speech, Memucan presented a solution not as a royal whim, but rather as an important precedent in the management of the country. The angry, drunken king was delighted at the opportunity to inflate the incident into an event of imperial importance. And therefore the king acted in accordance with the word of Memucan. As noted in the introduction, the book of Esther, with its formal style, does not criticize the king overtly. However, reading between the lines, Achashverosh emerges as a ridiculous, easily manipulated figure.
It's actually funny that Achashverosh merges was the word that was connected, but maybe they did that on purpose. Great. So this is similar to what I just said, and I did not remember that this is what Steinsaltz was going to tell us. So I'm
sorry. It's emerges. It's not merges.
You are correct. Yeah. Which makes more sense anyway. Great. Any thoughts or comments on this particular verse or commentary on the verse? Yeah, Paul.
It again raises the question, to what degree was he manipulated, and to what degree was this a shrewd political calculation?
Mm-hmm.
Because he from what it was implied earlier, he did not inherit the kingship. He brought this together, and his keeping everybody together was an important part of this gathering. So it could. So they're saying Steinsaltz seems sure that he was a drunken fool, easily manipulated, but I don't think it's really that clear.
Right. Well, I'm glad that you brought back his origin story, so to speak. It's interesting to think about the confidence that he may or may not have had, right? And maybe even similar to Esther and her story later on, right? This idea that if you are out of place and yet given authority, how much confidence can you really have in deciding things without knowing what has happened before you? If you're the king, I'd like to think that maybe you have some confidence along what you want to do, but you're right in that. Right, we say to conversion students all the time, you didn't grow up with this, right? So we have to teach it to you. It's kind of similar. If you didn't grow up around these types of edicts or these types of moments of punishment, et cetera, you might not feel confident in what you can then put forward. And so having someone like Memucan, whether or not he's a good or a bad guy, right? We don't actually have any feelings about him yet. It is really important. And Yitro tells Moshe that, right? Our first leader in our tradition who is doing the kind of leading that that we're seeing here, right? In terms of lots of people looking up to him. Yitro says, hey, bud, can't do this alone. Find some other people, because if you do it alone, you're not going to be able to sustain this. So thank you for bringing that back to our attention, Paul. Marshall.
Yeah, altar, I think, is also helpful here to me. And the king was good in the eyes of the king and the ministers, comma. And the king did according to Memucan's word. And his comment on that was, evidently, Achashverosh needs the express support of his courtiers before he can confidently embrace Memucan's counsel or anybody's.
Right.
So it mentions the king first.
Yeah.
He's not acting alone.
Right.
But then he's his counselors are also brought in.
Right. And actually support is a really important word there, right? He doesn't have to agree with them, but to have the support of them to be able to then agree or disagree is really important. Yeah, Barry.
Yeah, just to underline again the aspect of Ahasuerus being an outsider to royalty. I mean, he bought his way into this position. He has no knowledge of this. And so he needs the ministers to advise him. But what they're advising him to do is to promulgate an edict to the entire realm because of his marital problems, what husbands in their households should do. This is a total ridiculous aspect, puts him in an embarrassing position throughout the kingdom. He's totally unaware of this because he's an outsider.
Yeah, and that piggybacks what Paul was sharing also. Okay, the last verse of chapter 1. Dun, dun, dun. Stevie, you want to read for us? We're just going to go around the table, I guess. I can give you a thing, too. You want this? Do you have it?
Well, I don't have vowels, but I can.
Yeah, read the comic to us.
Vaishlach sefer email kobni note hamelach el mina mina kiftavav el am va'am kilshano liot kol ish sarir beveto midver kilshano amo kilshon amo. Okay. What?
No. You were looking at the Rashi. Okay, keep going.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. So, and they sent out scrolls to all the kingdoms of the realm, to kingdom to land to land. It was written and language to language, so that all the people, or all men perhaps, will rule their houses and speak in the language of that nation.
This is a very full verse. Very, very, very full verse. First of all, it is, as Stevie just experienced, is really hard to explain in English. First of all, there's lots of words that are repeated, right? Medina Medina, Am va'am, Kilshono, but then also Kilshon Amo, right? There's lots. If you've ever read this chapter of Megillah, you get tongue tied reading through it because of the same words, but the different tropes for the same words. So I'm sure Rick does it perfectly, but everybody else gets tongue tied. So what are we getting at here? Before we look at the Rashi, what is happening here? Remember, there's the last verse of the first chapter, okay? And as Stevie said, this is not written in the English translation, but as Stevie said, Sfarim were sent out, right? Books, scrolls, documents were sent out. It doesn't say that. It just says dispatches, which when we think of something that's dispatched, usually we think, at least I think of actual humans, not something like a scroll. But we're talking about scrolls that were sent out. Okay, Norm.
So they're publicizing this thoroughly, sending it to all the nations of the empire, and sending it to them all in their own languages, that there's an official translation. Everybody should be able to understand. Everybody who's literate, at least, should be able to understand what is written. It is noted that in some cases, when an empire conquers, they force, and the Greek Syrians are a great example of this. We celebrate Hanukkah about it, because in many cases, when somebody conquers another nation, they force those people to give up their religion and their language and adopt the official language of the empire.
Okay.
Ahasuerus did not do that. In order to try and help to win loyalty, he allowed people to keep their own practices, their own language, their own customs to a large extent, so long as they were being loyal to him, and presumably sending money to his treasury.
Okay, that was a lot of norm commentary, but yes, maybe all those things were happening.
So,
Yeah.
so in this case, he's saying everybody's going to know this. It's going to be extremely well known. Every man is going to be able to be authoritative in his own home.
Okay, great.
Then
Yeah.
there's this issue about the language.
Yeah.
Because Rashi says,
Wait, no, don't read Rashi
which
yet.
I won't get to, but the man is
Mhm.
who is a Sephardic commentator
Mhm.
who wrote in Ladino,
Mhm.
but whose commentary is available in English, and I've referred to it in many times on the Torah. He says that it's difficult to understand the part about being in his own life in their own languages, but that was crucial for the Jews. Because when people said, what does he mean by sending us word that every man should rule in his own home? Of course he should. Even a weaver in his own home must be the boss and must know this. But everybody saw how foolish the king is. And therefore, when they later read the decree about being able to kill the Jews, they're wondering, is he going to change his mind? Because they know he's not consistent and he's foolish. And because of that, when he read the second decree about exterminating Jews on the 13th of Adar, they did not jump the gun and do it in advance. They waited to the 13th because they knew it was possible that he was going to issue another edict that would contradict.
Okay, we're getting very ahead of ourselves. So let's
on the ways.
Okay, I sure will. All right, let's stick to this particular verse. Any other comments on this verse? If you look at the screen, or for those of you who are at home, you are looking at the screen, but for those of you in the room, if you look at the screen, oh, I made it too big. Hold on, sorry. Can you all see that sort of in the room? You can at home, but can you see it in the room? Okay, I broke it down. I broke it down for us to really see what each of these sections of this verse mean, because I think it's important for us to recognize that in a particular way, this is actually written very much like our Mishnah is written, in such a way that you would remember it, right? Mishnah is written so that there's lots of repetition, so that because it wasn't written down, you could actually memorize it. Specifically, pieces of Mishnah that have law associated. So I can't think of one to recite to you offhand, but if you look like in Barachot, for example, you'll see that there are certain words that are constantly repeated so that you can remember certain things without having to look it up because there was nothing to look up. This seems to be doing the same thing, right? This seems to be emphasizing, but also making sure that it is very specific as to what we are holding by. Because remember that an edict is something that you have to really ascribe to, right? This is now the law. So what it seems to be doing, and I have no proof of this, but this is how I'm reading this. The end of chapter 1 is not telling us what the edict says verbatim, but I think it's kind of giving us the edict. Oh, what does that say? Okay, can you all still see? Everyone at home? Okay, great. I don't know what just happened to the screen in the room, but okay, great. No. Sorry. Okay, so let's read through this just the way that I showed it to you here. So Vayishlach Sefarim et kol medinot hamelech. So scrolls were sent to all the different provinces of the king. El Medina u'Medina kichtava. So to each and every Medina, to each and every province, this scroll, this script was written. Kichtava in Hebrew is a lot easier to understand than in English, but it seems to mean that it's according to that which is written, right? So written the same way, copied. It was exactly the same is basically what this is trying to say. Sorry?
It's writing.
Kichtava, though, with the other kaf would be like it's writing, right? So, ve'el am va'am kilshono, and to each and every nation like their language, right? In their language. So if I speak English, it's going to be written in English, and if I speak French, it's going to be written in French. What is the one tefillah that this is the case for? We don't do it, but what is the one tefillah that this should be the case for? Yeah. The Amidah and also the Shema. Right? The Shema is supposed to be said in any language that you understand, because you're supposed to understand what the Shema is saying. So this is basically saying, if you need to know what this edict says, it needs to be written in your language. Okay. Lihiot kol ish sorer beveito. So every man should be a sorer, which is really more so than, what does it say here? Wield authority, sure, but should be like the prince of, or the what's the word I'm looking for? Chieftain of his home, right? Should have authority beyond just, I'm the man of the house, but should really have some kind of almost legal authority of their home. This very strong language. Umedaber kilshono amo. And he, right, we're talking about the man of the household here, and he should speak in the language of his own people. So not only is it telling us that we should read this edict and we should understand this edict, but also things should be changed, like language, to understand what's going on and to make sure that things are let's call it unified, but are across the board the same, so that this edict holds in all of these different places. Okay. Stevie, do you have a thought?
In this comic, they have some kind of poster with some kind of, scratches on it, and the people are in one block reading it, and the next block they're saying like, what do we think of next? And they're all laughing at it. So
that's very funny.
Yeah.
Okay, Renee.
Is the word shor, however you say that, is it from the same shorish as a sar, like a general?
So, like Sar HaMedina?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So rare. Mm-hmm.
So
this word, that's the word I just couldn't hear.
Yeah.
You. Is that the word you're talking about? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, because a general is a very strong person that has a lot of authority.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah, Barry?
Well, without getting into Rashi, just a prelude, looking at the construction of Daber, this is not he, the man of the house, speaking, but it's spoken, the language. This is the prelude to what Rashi's question is.
Okay.
Which I'm not going to get into because you don't want to right now.
Great. Stevie, let's read the Rashi.
Rebecca Schatz, kofa et ishto liomod et lishono v'im hi bat lishon acher. So he can compel, that's how they say it, his wife to learn his language if she was from a different, language group.
Okay, so this is what I was trying to say without saying when I was explaining the verse, the part of the verse above, umedaber kilshon amo, that the household is going to speak the language of the nation. What does language have to do? I can see Elon's gonna fume through the rest of this verse. What is this saying? This is not only is it a scary statement in terms of how a household should be run, but what is this saying about language? Rick, were you going to respond to that?
I was going to go off on Vayishlach.
Okay, so hold on 1 second. Elon, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, basically what it says is language is power, right? Who controls the language controls the power.
Exactly. So there is something I see you, Barry, hold on. There is something very important about us understanding that the language here is complete power. And so the idea that the man, and this is where I'm going to disagree with Barry, your last statement, that the man should make sure that the language that is being spoken is of the people. What the verse seems to be implying is that the man would know that language, but that the woman might not because she's probably not as educated according to the Megillah, and that she now has to learn a new language to make sure that not only is there communication between the two of them, but that she can understand what laws she may or may not be breaking, right? And so she has to then change her language so that the man can, and so that she can communicate with the man, or else the man has power over her. I venture to say the man has power over her by telling her she has to change her language, but that's neither here nor there. That this is a very, very manipulative and powerful move when it comes to partnership. Barry, hold on one second. Paul just hasn't spoken yet, so I'm going to call on Paul.
Thank you, Rabbi. You know, this is also the only way to kind of make sense as to why we're saying that the man should wield authority in his home. That makes sense, right? That follows right along with what we've been discussing. But then this speak the language of his own people, right? Like, what does that have to do with relations between husbands and wives?
Right.
I guess Rashi gets it here.
Yeah, and I think that Stevie kind of glossed over this, but the idea of kofeh et ishto, it says compel. What is kippah? A kippah is a covering, right? There's an idea here. I don't really know what the English word would be, but there's something like I don't know what the English word would be, but to like cover up the language that she knew before and teach her this new language, right? That you should overpower the language that she did know to then teach her this language. So the Rashi is really honing in on, Paul, on your question and comment here that this is really an important way of understanding how the man is going to rule his household. Okay, Barry, you've waited.
Just an aspect of this wide kingdom of multiple languages. So it's conceivable that in a household, the man and the women of his house all spoke different languages that they didn't really communicate. They just functioned. And from here on, there's a dominant language. The man's language will be the dominant, but it's a description of what previously exists, that in fact, they all spoke different languages in the same house.
Sure. Okay, Rick, Renee, Rachel, Stevie.
Renee first. She hasn't talked yet.
She did just talk, but Renee first.
Thank you, Rick. I was thinking in terms of language, not only between the couple, but in terms of the outside. Having grown up in a home where there were many languages spoken, the language that my parents spoke with us was different than the language that they spoke with each other. So when they didn't want us to understand something, they spoke a different language.
Right.
And those languages that they spoke within our home was not the languages, obviously, that were spoken in the general public.
Right.
So
that's actually a really beautiful way of softening this. I don't know that it's what it means, but it is a really beautiful way of softening it, that potentially what was happening here was that there was now this edict, which could have been scary. It definitely was a change for some, right? In taking more power, hopefully in homes that did not exist. Now that was going to exist. And what did it mean to, on the inside, have one thing happening that wasn't necessarily happening on the outside? That's a nice way of understanding it. Just like, if someone spoke, like when I was growing up, with our babysitter, we only spoke Hebrew. Well, spoke is a strong word. We only listened to her speak Hebrew and we responded in English, but our parents only spoke to us in English, right? So there was a difference in language depending on who you were speaking to acquire language, but it also showed some kind of relationship. So that's a very beautiful softening of this. Thank you for
with our parents, they always felt like they didn't need to speak to me in English because I would learn English once I was going to school.
Right.
So they didn't need to speak that to me.
Right. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Okay, Rick.
Okay, so I just the word Vayishlach, it hit me. It's the name of a Torah portion. So I looked at it, and it's Jacob sending messengers to Esau saying that, hey, don't kill me, basically. And he's trying to make peace with his brother. So just to clarify here, it could have said, and he sent Sfarim, but it just dispatches were sent. I think there's a subject there, whether it's Achashverosh or Memuchan, but some actual person sent it, and I just thought I should bring that up, the Vayishlach part. Second thing, will you send us? I love the Sefaria pages that you're sending. This is the last one, so you'll send 10, 11, 12 for the next time, please.
10, 11, 12.
Well, 10. Right now, this is page 9.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, I will send chapter 2 next time. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Of course. Rachel.
It's very different.
I don't think that microphone works. There you go.
Oh. I'm reading this very differently because of my experience with families that don't speak English. And that the person in the family who learns English first, and often that's the school child,
right,
ends up being the translator or interpreter for the members of the family that don't yet speak English.
Yeah.
And the first part of this verse that kind of resonated with me, the Afghan family that we helped settle.
Right.
In Afghanistan, particularly under the Taliban, but in Afghanistan, married women do not go out unaccompanied.
Right.
In fact, women over 12 do not go out unaccompanied.
Right.
And this is something the wife and the family really internalized.
Sure.
And consequently, she knows the least English of any of them.
Yeah.
Because either her husband or her son translates for her.
Sure.
And I'm thinking about compelling his wife to learn his language.
Yeah.
In that, another thought that I had, totally unrelated to the ones I've been saying, is if you had a harem, would a husband with 6 wives want them to be able to communicate in a language he did not speak?
Right.
That's kind of an amusing look.
Right.
But I'm just thinking of the role of language as bridging or not the inside of the household, the greater society.
Yeah, great. Okay, we have 2 minutes left. So I think Stevie had something to say. Stevie's not going to say anything. Okay, Norm.
I just want to say that for most of us, and certainly for the lowly weavers, even throughout the Persian Empire, the idea of a man having a wife who didn't speak his language is kind of odd. But in a time when upper classes and perhaps even middle classes had arranged marriages, it can certainly happen that one ends up with a husband and wife who do not speak the same language.
Yeah.
And so if the husband can compel the wife to learn his, that may put her at some disadvantage, at least for a time.
Yeah. Stevie is going to speak.
Just to respond to that very quickly, I'll say that in the ancient world, to a large extent, different languages were very similar to each other. Like there was not as much travel around the planet. I mean, sure, the empire might stretch from Hodu to Kush, but your wife is probably like, you speak Arabic, they speak Aramaic, right? So you could understand each other. you just had a few different expectations or, ways of interacting, but
Joel, last word, and then I'm going to say something very quickly.
It could be that she did speak the language. I mean, she had the ability to speak the language, but he was going to compel her to speak the language to the kids, because it's very important what the kids' mother's tongue was going to be.
Great. Yeah, that's a good point of passing it along. Okay, we are going to get to chapter 2 next week. I'm going to give you all a little bit of homework. Okay. And I'm going to do the same homework. Joel's already complaining. Read back through chapter 1. Okay. Joel, can I have that? This one's.
You're choppy.
Yeah, no, I know. Okay. Read through chapter 1. Don't read the Rashis. Keep yourself from, deciding that Memuchan is Haman and that Vashti was killed and all these things that you've come to think from the commentaries. Just read the Megillah. Read the Megillah, because when we get to the next part of the story, it's going to be important for us to have this foundation, both knowing that some of it transfers into the next piece of the Megillah and some of it just gets left behind in chapter 1. So read through the first, bless you, Lon. Read through the first chapter, and then we'll get to the next chapter next week. Thanks for joining. See y'all later.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.